What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today I've got an absolutely massive build for you, forged in the flames of Oblivion nostalgia and sharpened on the grindstone of Skyrim mods. This build has that classic Cyrodilic Mage vibe, well dressed in the finest clothes and ready to start flinging spells whenever the opportunity arises. Test her skills in battle and you'll soon find yourself fending off powerful illusions of your own image, but that is just one of many abilities in her sensational arsenal. She can also conjure a spell tome to hover in the air, blasting out magical projectiles like some sort of turret. She can absorb the armor from all the attackers around her and then pull one towards her with telekinesis and have her companion finish them off. Or perhaps it will be a ghostly image of her companion fighting as an ally alongside you both. There's so much this sorceress can do, and I'll have you know I've made the playstyle section of the video super extensive. I couldn't help but explain all the possibilities. We've placed timestamps in the description for your convenience as always, but don't get me wrong, the sorceress is not purposefully looking for trouble. She's nice enough, but trouble tends to find her when she goes to great lengths for magical pursuit. Her elegant dress really stands out next to any of the armored friends she'll be traveling with, and do note that you'll want a companion at all times. You may be an excellent mage, but you don't want blood or dirt all over your clothes. You're actually the daughter of a count after all, though politics aren't your main concern. I'll also have you know that the sorceress can ride alongside her companion on their horses on top of the water. Yes, you heard that all correctly. Personally, I find her aesthetic makes me think of a female mage strolling peacefully along the road between Anvil and Kvatch, around the area where that Ultima mage named Kaminalda attacks you in the Anvil recommendation quest. But this is Skyrim, and this sorceress won't be murdering any innocent travelers. That said, bandits, necromancers, and whatever else dwells in the places she adventures through will definitely feel her wrath. But before we unravel this character any further, I want to let you guys know that I am incredibly grateful for all of your support, and it always makes me happy to see people enjoying these Skyrim creations. Seriously, even just one positive comment can really go a long way for us, so a massive thank you to those who motivate us to keep doing what we do. I often say things like this at the very end of the video, but I really just wanted to let you all know now while most of you are still here. So now let's talk about the mods we're going to be using. You can find them in the description as always, along with the timestamps. So first up, we've got the Apache Divine Elegance store mod, and to be honest, there's some very strange and interesting outfits available for you to purchase and wear here, but we're keeping it classy and using this mod for our enchanted dress and jewelry. We've also got the Ordinator perk overhaul, and we're using it to invest heavily into 3 arcane skills, all of which change up the playstyle with new perks. Some of these will even lead to the use of unique special powers, so get keen for those. Also, definitely let me know in the comment section if you want us to make worth it videos on the perk trees from the Ordinator overhaul mod, where we would cover all of the perks available in a tree and speak about which ones are worth getting and how different perks work best for different builds. I've seen some of you asking for these videos before, so I'm interested to get even more input. Next, we've chosen the Apocalypse Magic of Skyrim mod for all of the unique spells, and many of the spells this build can cast haven't even been shown on FudgeMuppet before. Then of course we've got our Standing Stone favorite, the Andromeda Unique Standing Stones of Skyrim mod. This gives us much more variety with the Standing Stones, helping us beat our addiction to the vanilla Atronach Stone. We've got the Imperious Races of Skyrim mod to make each race feel distinct and different to one another, and as you'd expect, the Alternate Start mod. There's just no need to get caught crossing the border with this character. With all of that covered, let's get into the race, Standing Stone, and stats for the Sorceress. The Sorceress originates from Cyrodiil and was part of an Imperial family. In fact, the Count of Breville is her father. Now, with the Imperious Races of Skyrim mod, you'll actually find that Imperials are the only race where the health, magicka, and stamina stay the same. So unlike any of the other races, you get to start with 100 points in each stat. You will also begin with a carry weight of 300. You'll have 1% health regen per second, 3% for magicka, and 5% regeneration for stamina. But how about all the powers and the passives? Well, one of them is called Discipline, and in combat, nearby allies gain bonus armor and attack damage. As a build which specifically aims to have a companion at all times, this couldn't be more perfect. Then there's Imperial Virtues. With this, the Sorceress will randomly gain bonus health, magicka, or stamina when entering combat. As a build who will already be gaining bonuses in combat due to perks and spells, this just adds some more icing on the top of the cake. Then there's the Human Spirit. At levels 10, 20, and 30, you get opportunities to alter attributes, resistances, and skills. And finally, we have Colovian Star. This needs to be unlocked by completing 20 quests for the people of Skyrim, and once once you've got it, it will allow you to replenish the 2 attributes with the highest remaining percentage once per day. As for a standing stone, our choice has some advantages which are pretty perfect too, keeping things very beneficial. We're going with the Mage stone. So first up, it gives you Power of the Arcane. Simply put, this makes spells 10% more effective and scrolls 20% more effective. The build doesn't have to use scrolls at all, as you've got all the spells you need, but if you find some cool scrolls to use, why not? So our spells are 10% more effective, but what else? Well, there's also Mage's Path. This allows the sorceress to learn 2 mage skills of her choice 20% faster, and the reason this is so good is because she only actually uses 2 spellcasting skills, Alteration and Illusion. Enchanting is her 3rd and final skill if you're interested, and do remember that with only 3 skills, we're going to be diving deep into Alteration and Illusion. More on that in the perks section. Finally, we've got an unlockable power, literally called Ultimate Power. Once a day, you can choose one of 3 random schools of magic. Spells will be twice as effective and cost half as much for 60 seconds. It's not the most exciting name for a power, but it certainly is what it says it is. As for stats, you're going to have a set ratio of 50% health and 50% magicka until you have very significant magicka cost reduction, to the point where you're hardly running out during battle. At this point, you can switch it up to an allocation of 70% health and 30% magicka and stick to it from then on. Obviously, this stat spread shift happens the sooner you advance in enchanting, and therefore reduce the cost of casting illusion and alteration spells. Furthermore, if you get to a point where you seriously just don't need any more magicka at all, you could just start going 100% into health, but it will take a while before you reach that stage. Alongside all the protection and resistances, which I'll be explaining in this video, your health will definitely be more than enough to keep your heart pumping in battle. Alongside all the enchanting decisions to lower magicka cost, your magicka investments will also be more than enough and will ensure the spells keep casting. Now for the backstory. The sorceress was born as an only child in the city of Breville, located on the banks of the Niben Bay in the imperial province of Cyrodilic. Breville may be one of the 9 major cities, but it definitely isn't the nicest. In fact, Breville is considered by most to be one of the shadiest places in all of Cyrodilic. Crime is rampant here, but for a lot of Breville's inhabitants, it's a life of crime which allows them to put food on the table and a roof over their head. The Larcius River runs through the town, and in paintings it would appear quite serene, but to witness it in person is to offend the nostrils, as one will soon realize it actually functions as the city sewers. Perhaps the only distraction from the stench is a bottle of skooma, which so many of the city dwellers seem to be fond of. Luckily for the sorceress, she was not born squabbling in one of the many wooden shacks which sat stacked upon each other. No, she was born into a life of luxury and nobility, safe within the walls of the city castle. She was the daughter of the Count, an imperial man who had lost his wife to the blade of a Dark Brotherhood assassin when the sorceress was only 3 years old. He was devastated by the murder, but had help raising his child from other nobles, particularly so with the help of his steward, a kind-hearted Khajiit woman who largely played a maternal role in the sorceress's upbringing. The loss of his wife fueled the Count with an unwavering dedication to keeping the streets of Breville as safe as possible. On paper, the sorceress's father was considered excellent at being the Count, for he was cracking down on crime, and less problems were needing to be dealt with by the guards. Unlike Regulus Terentius, the Count you may have visited in Oblivion, this was a man who would never let his power go to his head. He always had his hands filled with problems to fix, unlike other Counts with much easier cities to manage, who tended to spend more time grasping gold goblets of wine and feasting on the finest meats. Still, castle life was castle life, so the sorceress was brought up wearing beautiful clothing at all times and taught from an early age how to present herself and act with ladylike class. She had a few warm memories of her mother wearing elegant robes that she would never forget, but due to the tragedy happening at such a young age, she didn't have enough time to truly get to know the woman. It's no surprise she took the loss a lot easier than her father did. The sorceress loved to dress up and act out different stories she would read about in the many books in the castle library. Other times she would create entire stories in her own head, listing down the various characters and storylines she came up with on pieces of parchment she kept under her pillow. She continued coming up with stories and acting them out well into her early teens, and she loved tales involving magic and the outdoors. This hobby was one of the best ways for her to stay entertained, allowing her to feel as if she was escaping into a new life with more exciting surroundings. She definitely loved her life in the castle, but like any young teenager, the sorceress would often take it all for granted. It was at times like these when her father would have an entourage of guards take her from the confines of the castle across the long wooden bridge and into the main city streets. The idea was to show her how good she had things at home and how hard life could be for other people. Apart from these trips around the city and a few to other activities, the sorceress was fairly sheltered. Sure, she had a lot of education and knew a lot about many different subjects, but she had no experience in the real world, let alone any sense of street smarts. On her trip through the streets with some guards, the sorceress was not made to feel guilty or to be punished, she was simply shown how things were in the city, and some of Breville's citizens were also pleased to see her noble presence, though many of the inhabitants couldn't care less. Some hated anything to do with the castle, while lots were simply too preoccupied with their daily tasks, criminal or otherwise, to take notice. As the sorceress approached the age of 14, she had developed a pretty good eye for who the people in the street were. She could never know for sure, but she was fairly certain of the intentions of those around her. She could pick who was addicted to illegal substances, which people probably sold these substances, who was looking for trouble, and those who just wanted to live an honest life. Oddly, the sorceress felt that as she was growing older, the life of Breville's inhabitants had become more stressful. She could feel the tension in the air slowly building as time went by, but she couldn't figure out why. Crime was being reduced by her father's efforts, and the counts of other cities were praising his efforts. Anyways, her father probably wouldn't have expected it, but the sorceress actually enjoyed any time she got outside the castle, and as much as she despised criminals, and would obviously never become one, she couldn't help but be jealous of all the adventures some of them got up to. Life was never routine, and sometimes she would overhear shady characters boasting about fun things they did on the roads between faraway places. The sorceress longed to travel and visit other parts of Tamriel, but so far had spent her life confined to the areas around the city. Of course, she had also been taken to areas outside of the city by the guards, many of which were paid to play games with her in the surrounding forests. That said, she was made to stick to safe areas which they let her explore fully, knowing perfectly well that she would never find anything dangerous or particularly interesting. She knew many of the guards on a first-name basis. She was even taught to ride a horse, but never got the satisfying feeling she wanted of just heading for the horizon. All of this grew to feel boring to her as time passed, but soon her wish for a change of scenery would definitely be granted. You see, the sorceress's father also knew something wasn't right in Breville, but he hadn't exactly told his daughter of all the details of his suspicions or the information he'd received from multiple informants he had planted around the city. Her hunch that strains were rising was in fact correct, and her father knew it was too late to stop what may be coming. The thing was that while he had been fixing up crime in the city, he had actually been making it harder for many of the residents to survive. So much of their income and therefore their basic needs like food and drink was funded from illegal activities that the Count had put a stop to. In many cases, however, the crimes stopped being reported but were actually still carried out with increasing amounts of stressful secrecy. Most of the reduced crimes were acts of violence, and the removal of newly established skooma dealers was also quite common. But the big players were still well and truly alive, and with the small-time competition no longer biting at their heels, their power had actually grown to all new levels. In recent times, the Count had been told by his spies that skooma trafficking from places like Gideon, Leowyn, and Alabaster had risen, but the only proof they had was word of mouth from the locals. It would be hard to find who the real ringleaders were anyway, let alone arrest them. Their criminal forces hiding in the city in plain sight could very well outnumber the guards. All he knew for sure was that these criminals were out there, and that there were two factions who had become increasingly confrontational towards each other. Near the end of the 187th year of the Fourth Era, the Count sent the sorceress to Skingrad. She was to live with the priests and the priestesses of Julianos for almost a year, and learn basic magic. The Count knew that the priests would impart perfect morals onto his daughter. He knew basic restoration would be fun to her and a useful skill for the future. He knew the adventure to Skingrad would be extremely rewarding and a life experience the sorceress would desire, who was to travel on horseback alongside 3 guards, and he knew that the combination of learning magic and traveling to a new place would be irresistible, the perfect excuse to get her out of Breville safely before anything crazy could happen. He needed time to get new issues under control, and so the sorceress traveled all the way from Breville to Skingrad. Seeing the Imperial City along the way was beautiful, and as nobility in Cyrodilic, she felt a little ashamed that she was only seeing it this close for the first time. Arriving in Skingrad, the sorceress quickly made her way to the Great Chapel of Julianos, where the guards she had traveled with left her as she was greeted by the priests and priestesses, and so began months of a new lifestyle, filled with prayers and community work, as well as plenty of learning about magic. However, a lot of the the magical learning was theory, and the only real spells she learned were healing ones. She tended to the wounded who came to the chapel, and also learned to heal herself. Nevertheless, the sorceress was filled with enjoyment to start with. She was 15 years old and was already casting a spell, a real spell, like those used in the stories she would read of and create herself. Being dedicated mostly to the worship of Julianos, the chapel was actually fonder of studying magic than those who worshipped other divines. One of the head priestesses, named Claudia, taught her that Julianos was the Adric god of logic and wisdom, and that he is usually associated with magic. Due to this, Julianos is often revered by mages and wizards. The sorceress couldn't have been sent to a better chapel, and Claudia quickly became her favorite person to learn from. She also loved the outdoors, and often took the sorceress out of the city to stroll through the fertile lands and forests outside the city walls. Skingrad was so much nicer than Breville, as was the nature around it. At least that's what the sorceress thought. She loved her time in Skingrad, although she secretly yearned to explore more magic far outside of the chosen teachings. She admitted this to Claudia during a peaceful night where the two had traveled out so the sorceress could learn basic astrology. Her father had obviously paid the chapel a hefty sum in preparation for his daughter's visit, and the money was being put to its full use, ensuring the sorceress's thorough education would continue despite leaving home. Upon learning of her desire to learn more magic, the priestess actually taught her how to summon and manipulate light as a means to improve visibility. This basic lesson also came with some theory on the alteration school of magic, and the sorceress appreciated these private lessons greatly. As one might expect, however, they would only ever quench her thirst for magical understanding temporarily. Things were mostly good until she received word from home. Tensions between the two skooma kingpins in the city had reached an all-time high, and they clashed with each other in a massive riot. A fire burnt down most estates in the city, and even the lucky old lady statue stood no more. Breville was in the shadow of its former self, and her father had barred the castle door shut to protect himself, his guards unable to break the fighting apart before widespread destruction had occurred. He wrote to his daughter telling her to stay away from the city until he had things back under control. She must resist the urge to come home to see him, for it was not safe. She feared for his life, but trusted his guidance, remaining with the followers of Julianos for many years, writing to her father constantly throughout it all. He had a massive cleanup job to do, and the sorceress had plenty of time to pass and a lot of life decisions to make. She was getting older now, becoming a young adult, and as much as she liked the people at the chapel, she didn't want to be here forever. She was growing increasingly interested in learning magic, and had now become overly accustomed to the area of Skingrad, just as she had been with Breville. It was strange, but she kind of missed Breville simply because it was home, and because she had been instructed not to return. The sorceress decided to take time off from Skingrad, and asked her father for funding so she could learn more about magic. Using the coin, she traveled around in search of lessons from established magical guilds. She spent many more years traveling out to various other cities, seeking out the College of Whispers and the Synod Mages. She enjoyed seeing the rest of Cyrodiil with her own eyes instead of relying on her imagination or pictures in books. She messed around learning a lot of magical theory from both guilds, but ultimately decided that these organizations were a waste of her time. Due to her background of growing up in a castle, she could sense how incredibly political the guilds were. They constantly aimed to gain the favor of the Elder Council, as opposed to having their main goal be the pursuit of magic. All in all, the sorceress felt like she wasted a lot of effort messing around with these guilds, and many of them shut her off from the best learning opportunities, for the factions were rivals, and when she mentioned she had interactions with both of them, guild members weren't pleased. The sorceress would still go on adventures of her own during these years, and returned to Skingrad plenty of times. In fact, her father eventually sent word that it was safe to return to Breville, and so her life took another turn. She headed home to enjoy quality time with her dad, and to help reduce the burden of his daily struggles as a count. She did this with great diligence, but still found herself in a slump, feeling dissatisfied. So far, she had lived quite an enjoyable life, making lots of friends and learning a ridiculous amount of information, but it was not fulfilling. She felt as if she had spent too much time in too many places, gaining well-rounded knowledge but failing to be a master at anything. She was well into adulthood and hadn't become strongly gifted in any skills, and she hadn't delved into her passion for magic as much as she would have liked to. Telling her father of this internal strife, he recommended she head off to Skyrim. He told her that the College of Winterhold was a place where politics weren't so common, and real magic was taught to anyone with some foundational skills and a strong desire to learn. She had read of the place before, but didn't think she would have to travel all the way to Skyrim just to learn magic. Turns out this might be the best choice for her after all, so off she went, going on horseback into the land of the Nords. When we meet up with the sorceress, she will have traveled to the College of Winterhold and completed the initial joining phase. Choose the member of a guild option with the alternate start mod and pick the College of Winterhold. In Skyrim, she will seek out magic and develop herself greatly, constantly learning new things but also using the services of others to do a lot of the dirty work. She doesn't enjoy getting blood on her clothes and likes the feeling she had when she was younger of guards escorting her around and protecting her. Because of this, she finds great use in spending her coin on companions, and she also likes having someone to talk to, even if they are a paid mercenary. Discovering she is Dragonborn will also be huge for the sorceress. Upon writing to her father about it, he will be very proud and tell her to pursue this path to the fullest degree. To him, there is no greater honor than being her father. Playing the sorceress, you'll constantly go on adventures when the opportunity arises, and due to her background, you will dress well at all times and speak as formally as possible. Learning of magic, she will also fall in love with illusion magic and also pick up the alteration magic Claudia had started teaching her. Not only does she want to protect herself without wearing armor, but she also loves the idea of winning fights without personally wielding destructive elemental magic or weapons. Illusion magic appeals for this reason, for it allows her to manipulate the minds of foes and even fabricate illusory images to fight for her. She will be pro-empire and will spend a lot of septims on purchasing and upgrading a beautiful player home whenever she can get the chance. The one in Solitude is quite perfect as, after all, she's accommodated to lavish living conditions. She can also store magical artifacts and items in her home. Morally, the sorceress begins quite righteous. However, as her understanding of magic grows further, she will become slightly grayer in her decision making. She's still a kind-hearted person, but she's not a goody two-shoes if it doesn't suit her highest ambitions. The sorceress is also very aware of this and is thankful that the drop in morality only brought her down from a very high moral level to a just above neutral one. If she didn't grow up around such virtuous individuals, she may have found herself falling from a neutral morality to quite a dark place. When it comes to factions, obviously you will join the College of Winterhold to develop all of your arcane skills, becoming a master of illusion, alteration, and enchanting. You'll eventually become the Archmage, another achievement to make yourself and your father proud. The Dawnguard DLC will also be completed, where the sorceress will side with the Dawnguard to remove the vampire menace. Skyrim is already in the midst of civil war, and the sorceress is well aware how much worse things can get if living conditions become even tenser. Feel free to undertake various side quests involving scientific pursuit, like helping Neloth massively in the Dragonborn DLC, which is another DLC you will explore in great depth. Certain Daedric quests should also be undertaken, pretty much anything that doesn't involve the sorceress doing super immoral or gross stuff. You'll also do the Civil War plot, siding with the Empire, and the main story, of course. Another awesome thing to do is to wipe out the Dark Brotherhood. Not only does she consider them an evil faction, but because she knows a Dark Brotherhood assassin killed her mother when she was young, it will be all the more worth it. With all of these role-playing and character decisions sorted, let's get right into the stats and the gameplay side of things. So when it comes to skills, the sorceress only needs 3. There's illusion and alteration for all the crazy spells and powers I'll be going through, and enchanting to buff yourself up with resistances and reduce casting costs. So now we can talk spells and powers, and then I'll go through the essential perks, and after that I'll go through the playstyle in great detail. So looking at alteration, we've got Okado's Recital. This allows you to store up to 3 beneficial self-targeted spells which will cast for no cost whenever you enter combat. We're going with Grand Healing, Ebony Flesh, and Thundering Hooves. Thundering Hooves will make the horses you and your companion travel on faster, regen stamina, and be able to run on top of water. It's one of the many spells this build can use whenever needed. Ebony Flesh obviously keeps you protected by increasing your armor rating, and Grand Healing heals any damage you and your companion may have recently sustained. I'll touch on this again in the playstyle section. We've also got Wither, which is a projectile you cast which continually reduces a target's movement speed and attack damage as time goes by. We're also using the vanilla Paralyze spell, which, as you would know, immobilizes your opponents. Malvisor's Gauntlet is another spell, a master spell actually, although we don't tend to use it that often. It is fun though, and basically pulls your enemy towards you using magic and holds them in front of you in the air. Hethoth's Grimoire is another master spell which is really neat, as it lets you create a hovering spell tome of a non-concentration projectile spell, which then repeatedly casts the spell in the direction you're facing. A third master spell, which is there if you want it, is Battle Tide. This steals points of armor rating from each nearby target and gives it to you. But what about the illusion spells? Well, obviously you've got standard ones like Pacify, Harmony, Frenzy, Hysteria, Mayhem, and Rout. Use these state-changing spells as desired to strongly alter the moods and therefore actions of those on the battlefield. But that said, let's rip open the fun stuff and talk about the new illusion spells we're going to be using. So one useful one is called Pale Shadow, and this makes an illusion of the target which then attacks them and deals the same damage, but this illusion only has 1 health, so you have to use it strategically. A more advanced but similar spell is called Evil Twin. This creates illusions of all the nearby enemy targets which then attack them, but you have to keep the spell going for the illusions to stay active. And finally there's Mind Control, which lets you control a humanoid who will fight back when attacked. And that's pretty much everything for spells. One thing you could do is learn the conjuration spell Soul Trap, even though we don't use conjuration, to help with enchanting progress. We've got lots of powers too, like those from our Race and Standing Stone, plus some from our perks. Things like Blind Guardian, Aurification, Lamb to the Slaughter, Nemesis, and Heavy Weighs the Tapestry. Here are the essential perks for creating this Sorceress build. From the Illusion skill tree, take Illusion Mastery 2 out of 2, Illusion Jewel Casting, Imposing Presence, Nemesis, Blind Guardian, Wraith Walker, Wilting, Terror, Pandemonium, Nightfall, The Reaper Comes, Lamb to the Slaughter, Heavy Weighs the Tapestry, Commanding Presence, Crown of the False King, Imperious Splendor, Protect Your God, Dream Thief, Kindred Mage, Fickle Fate, Master of the Mind, Dream Charm, and Dream Gears. Let's talk about some notable ones here. So with Imposing Presence, the Sorceress will radiate an aura of mystical charisma that touches all within 40 feet. This will make your illusion spells cast on those affected 25% more powerful and last 30% longer. This is why I didn't cover the duration of each spell in the spells list, because it changes a lot depending on multiple perks and certain effects. Nemesis is an awesome perk which can be activated, as is The Reaper Comes, Heavy Weighs the Tapestry, Blind Guardian, and Lamb to the Slaughter. I'll explain all of these in the playstyle part though, it just feels more appropriate that way. Now as I've mentioned, these perks give us special powers to activate in the gameplay, but the reason I'm bringing them up again now is due to another perk named Wraith Walker. You need 100 illusion to get it, but what it does is make your illusion spells 50% more powerful and 50% longer lasting for 10 seconds after you use an activation based perk like the ones I've just mentioned. Because we'll be using these pretty often, the power of your illusion spells is going to be off chops. Another cool perk we're getting is called Protect Your God. For the most part, you'll want to stay out of reach when enemies come swinging their war axes, but if you are struck by a weapon, then this perk may come into effect. What it can do is compel a nearby ally affected by the Commanding Presence perk to engage your attacker, dealing 250% extra attack damage for 5 seconds. Again, because we're using companions, this is perfect, because we'll have a nearby ally. But what is Commanding Presence? Well, it's very similar to Imposing Presence, but what it does differently is give allied creatures and people within 40 feet 20% extra attack damage and a 20% chance of a critical strike. Before we move on to alteration perks, one final illusion perk I thought I'd mention is called Dream Gears. You won't have many situations where you can use it, but what it does is allow you to activate sleeping victims to send them a dream which compels them to fight at your side until released. You can only have one dream thrall at a time, but it's definitely something to try out and have fun with during your playthrough. Now let's look at alteration. You're going to want to take Alteration Mastery 2 out of 2, Mage Armor 3 out of 3, Distorted Shape, Geomancer, Throne of Nirn, Philosopher's Stone, Command Lock, Aurification, Alter Self-Resistances, picking Shock and Frost, Home Mythal, Emergency Teleport, Dimension Door, Alter Self Attributes, picking Magicka, Nullifier, Wild Shrines, Wellock's Dormant Arcana, picking Armor, and then Water Walking, Movement Speed, and Spell Absorption, Intuitive Magic 2 out of 2, and Arcane Thesis. So what stands out here? Well, quite physically standing out of the ground, we've got the Throne of Nirn perk. When standing still for 5 seconds while holding a spell, a pillar of earth becomes summoned under your feet, carrying you into the air and out of melee range. From my experience, however, I can tell you will still be in melee range if you're fighting hordes of giants and mammoths. I guess it's safe to say you'll be out of melee range almost always. Now, besides the vertical advantage, your spells are also 20% more powerful or last 40% longer while you're on top of the pillar, making it the perfect purge to dominate the battlefield from with alteration and illusion magic. Do note that the effect is disabled when you lower your hands. Once every 12 in-game hours, the Aurification perk lets you turn a paralyzed enemy below half health into gold, so that's handy. And And the Philosopher's Stone also helps you get rich, generating gold equal to 4 times your alteration skill level once per day. This will help the sorceress save up for her high-class fashion tastes, as well as all the spells we're using. You can roleplay this as alteration magic giving you the gold, or you could roleplay it's actually your father sending you gold. Now, Home Mythal is another cool perk for this build to use, but you must unlock it in a wise location of your choice. You see, what it does is summon a permanent magical field into the lands of Skyrim, specifically at the location in which the perk is chosen. Alteration spells will last twice as long if cast within 5,000 feet of this location, and 20 times as long if cast within 250 feet. Pretty cool, hey? With the Intuitive Magic perk maxed out, Novice and Apprentice spells will cost nothing to cast, and this is pretty useful considering that this build will still use some of these spells in the end game. For example, Pale Shadow is a Novice spell, and Wither is an Apprentice spell. I'll explain Wellock's Dormant Arcana very soon in the Playstyle section, but let's quickly cover enchanting perks. So from enchanting, we've simply chosen Enchanting Mastery 2 out of 2, Gem Dust, Regalia, Twin Enchantment, Arcane Nexus, and Miracle. These are all super powerful, and I really like the sound of them for role-playing too. For example, Gem Dust allows you to destroy a flawless gem and sprinkle its dust on the enchanting table. New enchantments are 25% stronger when placed upon an item of the type corresponding to the gem. Wearing jewelry that's enchanted definitely has its benefits. With Regalia, new enchantments placed upon robes, hoods, and necklaces are 30% stronger. So a lot of our enchantments are going to be pretty potent. On top of this, we can upgrade one arcane enchanter with the Arcane Nexus perk for 2,500 gold, making new enchantments created here 25% stronger. And finally, why not choose to use the Miracle perk here too? With this, the sorceress puts all of her energy into one enchanted item, allowing you to place 3 enchantments on it, all of which become 25% stronger. This crazy accomplishment can only happen once, so make sure you listen to the gear section. And now we can finally dive into explaining the playstyle. Firstly, remember that you'll always want a companion. Feel free to gear them up with powerful items, and I definitely prefer using someone who isn't also a mage, but really it's up to you. So in battle, you'll have Okado's Recital already prepared, causing Ebony Flesh, Grand Healing, and Thundering Hooves to occur all at once for 0 cost. Firstly, this heals any damage you and your companion near you may have encountered previously and not yet healed. Secondly, it allows your horse and your companion's horse to run faster, regenerate stamina, and run on water. This allows you to escape if you want, but because it lasts ages, it will also just be active after battle is concluded, as you ride off and travel wherever else you wish to go. And finally, it puts Ebony Flesh on you, helping you stay more protected against enemy damage. Now, due to a perk we got called Wellock's Dormant Arcana, the activated Ebony Flesh will then grant you 10% spell absorption, 5% more movement speed, and normal water walking, which is just even cooler. All in all, you've just entered battle and you've got all of these handy effects going on already. Anyways, once you're actually fighting, you'll want your companion to do a lot of the close-up and personal work while you stay back. Due to the Throne of Nirn perk, we will often be elevated above the ground, only able to be hurt by very tall melee attackers or ranged attackers. Good thing we have strong resistances to magic. Crowd control the battlefield with the Wither spell and the Paralyze spell, and take advantage of the spell called Pale Shadow. This is the one that creates an image of the target which attacks them, and it deals the same damage as them, it just has 1 health. This means it will die instantly. However, because you've already paralyzed the target, the Pale Shadow won't be getting killed by them anytime soon, and can often easily kill the real version of itself. Another thing you can do to control the battlefield is use the standard vanilla illusion spells, so don't forget about them, but you don't need me to tell you that. Focusing back on that apocalypse magic though, there's another cool illusion spell called Evil Twin. What you can do is just hold the cast down constantly, and the spell will constantly manifest illusions of nearby enemies to attack them. This is a prime spell and should be used often, especially when the enemies are already occupied by their own Pale Shadow and your companion, but also your companion's image via the Blind Guardian perk. This is the perk which gives you a power you can use to conjure an illusion of a non-hostile target in battle. So your companion has an ethereal looking version of themselves coming out to fight enemies, and your enemies have versions of themselves erupting from nowhere to also attack their real selves. All the while, you've also paralyzed people, you're on a pillar in the sky, and you may even have frenzied or pacified targets and withered targets too. You can also pacify a target with a calming spell, and then activate the Reaper Comes, which was mentioned as an illusion perk. This causes a wraith to come to slay the target within 15 seconds, so with this build there is clearly tons going on. Now, if you thought there were already enough illusory images images of enemies running around to help you, remember there's going to be more. You see, you've also got the Nemesis power. Activate an enemy in combat and you can summon an illusion of themselves which will relentlessly attack them. It deals 1% extra attack damage per level of your illusion skill and has a 180-second cooldown. Do remember though that all of these helpers you have, including your companion, are going to be even stronger allies than you expect simply due to all of our related perks. Other things to activate include Heavy Weighs the Tapestry. Just make sure the enemy is under the effect of a frenzy spell and you can incapacitate them with magical exhaustion for 30 seconds, draining 500 points of magicka and stamina. Lamb to the Slaughter is another good one to throw into the playstyle. Enemies you activate who are under the effect of a Fear spell are forced to stand still for 30 seconds and your attacks against them ignore armor. That said, I'd rather just cast Pale Shadow and have their own illusion image kill them. And finally, a last awesome thing to include, besides the obvious sensational stuff like riding across water on a horse, is Hethoth's Grimoire. As much as I hate saying Hethoth's, this spell is really cool. Basically, you summon a spell tome that floats into the air, constantly shooting the spell that you had in your left hand when you cast it. It aims wherever you're looking, and if you want to be stupid with it, you can even run through it from behind and make it kill you, but that's not the plan. The plan is to use whatever projectile-based spell to constantly blast your enemies apart, or paralyze them, or wither them, whatever it may be. One awesome thing to do with this though is to actually use powerful destruction spells. You see, you may not be a destruction master, but with this spell that won't matter because the tome will be casting it for you. So feel free to load Ice Storm up and send a blizzard of constant frost across the battlefield if you so choose to. Other useful spells to unleash atop the throne of Nirn Pillar include Battle Tide, Malvisor's Gauntlet, and Mind Control. As I've told you, Battle Tide can be used to basically absorb points of armor from each nearby enemy, but remember that not all enemies actually have armor rating, so I'd recommend it around large hordes of bandits or other armored targets. Mind Control lets you take control of a humanoid in combat who will fight back when attacked, Sheath to cancel, and then there's Malvisor's Gauntlet, which as I've explained is more fun than anything, at least for me, because I can destroy my opponents without needing it. But either way, this powerful spell allows you to telekinetically pull an enemy towards you and they'll just dangle there helplessly while you kill them. Spin around in circles on your raised pillar and watch them spiral around you in the air for extra enjoyment. As for apparel, the sorceress gets her beautiful fantasy look from the Apache Divine Elegance store mod. You can find the Divine Elegance store southwest of Rorikstead and just to the southeast of Old Hroldan. Here you'll want to purchase the following: the DE Dress Winter Red, the DE Freya Earring Amber, the DE Freya Necklace Amber, and the DE Nails Dark Red. Yes, that's right, you actually purchase colored nails to match the red dress. All in all, I love the high-class vibe this aesthetic pulls together. You'll also want fine boots, I've gone with the black variant, and throw in a gold diamond ring too. Carrying magical scrolls is also an option, but it's not necessary. As we're using powerful spells to control the battlefield and protect us, we won't be wielding any weaponry or wearing a set of sturdy armor, but do keep in mind that your companions can have strong weapons and armor that you give them, and if you want to, you could, in theory, carry a random soul trap weapon and the Black Star from Azura's quest in order to help you with leveling up your enchanting skill. Now in terms of enchantments, here's what you'll want to do. On the dress, put on Fortify Alteration and Fortify Illusion to lower the cost of casting spells from both schools. We can't enchant the earrings or our red nails, but we can enchant the awesome necklace. We'll actually want to use our miracle perk on this one, allowing us to have 3 total slots for different enchantments on this one item. We recommend Fortify Alteration and Illusion again to lower casting costs, and then get Shock Resistance to grant us further protection against mages. Our fine boots will also help keep us protected, as we'll be enchanting them with Frost Resistance and Fire Resistance. We want to be protected in all kinds of ways, and remember, we've got even more resistance from our perks and our Flesh spell. Finally, enchant the gold diamond ring with Fortify Alteration and Fortify Illusion, again just chopping down our casting costs significantly. One final note in regards to gear is that you can include other dress options if you'd like to spice things up. There's different color variants of the same dress that you can buy in the Divine Elegance store, and there's all kinds of other dresses entirely, although some are going to suit the character a lot more than others. Most importantly, have fun with this magical build. And that concludes this incredibly arcane and long build, the Sorceress. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the Cyrodilic vibe of the build or the cool illusion and alteration magic used in the playstyle, be sure to give the video a like, only if it deserves it, of course. Subscribe to get more Skyrim builds just like this delivered to your life regularly, and let us know what you thought in the comments section. As always, the mods and timestamps for video navigation have been placed in the description for your convenience, and our social social media links are there too if you just can't get enough FudgeMuppet. My name is Michael. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.